Hello, crazy people! Soy loco por ti, Juquery! Soy loco em casa. Esse ano, o festival Soy Loco por ti, Juquery é em casa, em sua casa. Soy loco por ti, Juquery.
Hello, welcome everyone. We are starting our second day of Culture and Health. My name is Lealdo Ribeiro. I work here at the Júlio Cesar Museum. I will be here the next days as the MC of the seminar. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, regardless of where you are, because today is a day in which we have many participations from abroad, Switzerland, USA. I'd like to say that the schedule is complete in our website, so locoportijuki.com. And today we have a very interesting schedule. And before I forward to our instructions, I'd like to say that we have simultaneous translation into Portuguese and into English. It's two different links. In the YouTube page, so Loco Portuguese YouTube page, you will find it. We also have live transmission on Facebook from the Goethe-Institut. The second seminar, Culture and Health, is an initiative from the mayor's office of Franco da Rocha, and this starts since last year within the Soy Loco por Ti Juquery. The third Soy Loco por Ti Juquery is provided by PROAC and Cultural Productions. We have some partners of Goethe-Institut, Physicality Area North, for example, and the Hospital Complex Juquery with the help of Cesar Museum and also the Secretariat of Culture of the State of São Paulo. Today, as I mentioned, is a very special day because we will know closer the living museum that exists in many different cities around the world. We are going to go around the living museum in Switzerland, getting to know the spaces, the artists, and the living session band. According to Dr. Rose Emma, who is director and founder of the Living Museum in Switzerland, the initiative is an open studio for art and care for those with mental issues, and at the same time, an open museum. Then we will have a philosophy of care, and we will have the participation of Dr. Rose and Dr. Janus Gloriation from the Inconscientes Museum and Paulo Carcosi by the Juquery Hospital Complex, and also participation from camps with Dr. Eduardo. Now, I would like to welcome Dr. Rose Yemen. I think she will appear on screen now.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much
Hello,
for inviting
Dr.
us
Rose.
to this beautiful event.
Obrigada por convidar-nos para participar desse evento lindo.
We are the ones that thank your participation deeply and also for showing a little bit of your work, of what you do in the Living Museum of Switzerland. I think now we can go to the presentation of the Living Museum.
We are here in Wiel in Switzerland at the campus of the psychiatric clinic Wiel. Here right in front of the Atelier's Living Museum, which was the second living museum in the world. And here's the entrance to our living museum, and please come with a little tour. Here is the Café Museum. This is a place where people can come, they cook, they make coffee, and it's very important that we have like a healthy food. And it's also a very important meeting point where a lot of people can come together, they talk, they discuss, and it's like it's the heart of the living museum, like our center. We have here different studios in the whole house, like 4 studios with different materials. And the artists, they can decide which kind of material they want to use for their artwork, and then they go to one of the 4 studios. Here we have the Arts and Media studio. Here we have the sewing machines and all kinds of materials where people can make handicrafts, but not only handicrafts, but also like little art projects out of textile materials. And here we have the main space of the Arts and Media studio, a place where the artists can sit near to us. We talk, we discuss together, we listen to funny stories. Here we have an area where the computers, the new media is integrated, and people can also work with Photoshop or InDesign to create pieces of art. Here we are at our gallery, where the artists can exhibit and sell their work. Here we are at the ceramic studio. Here we come to the music studio. We will have the concert with the Living Session Band. This is their room where they practice, and you will get a little insight later on. So, thank you so much. We are now very proud that we have 2 artists here that are live painting for us today. You can follow their processes, and you can see in the end how the painting developed. Here we have Joseph Anthony Gomez. He comes to the Living Museum for many months now, and he's a great force with his art. He's inspiring everybody around him, and I'm very curious what's going to happen here.
What's going to happen here? I never know. The pictures always develop as I work with them, and should I take them? And so I have to sit back and think of a particular picture. The influence is from Aboriginal pictures, which I've seen before, and so I'm just working on putting another more colors into some of these areas here that are not filled yet. And then at the end, I will fill the rest of it as this is all done in white. And that's because that's just, it makes it just stand out, and I really like it.
So thank you very much, Gomez. I will come back to you later on. So we now have here Corinna Schleuniger. She's been amazing. She came to the Living Museum and never thought that she would be able to do artwork. And as soon as she started, she brought out one art piece after the other. You can see here the paintings around herself. And I just want to ask you a question. Woran arbeitet sie heute?
Ich mache eine Figur auf Holz. Also ich habe sie geschnitzt, eine Nonne, eine Ordensschwester.
Okay, Corinna Schleuniger, she's working on a wooden sculpture. It's a nun.
Und das erste Mal, dass ich eine Holzfigur anmale. Das ist meine zweite Figur und die erste, die ich anmale. Ich weiß nicht, wie es herauskommt. Ich bin gespannt.
Okay, that is her second wooden sculpture, but it's the first one that she's going to paint on. So we are very excited what's going to happen in this process. As I know her, she works very fast, so you will have to see something afterwards. So, and now we prepared a portrait about Corinna Schleuniger, where she gives more insight in her artwork.
Also ich bin Corinna Schleuniger, bin im Januar hier in der Psychiatrie Wil, habe 3 Kinder, die sind erwachsen, Mann. Ich war zuerst stationär bis im Juni und jetzt bin ich in der Tagesklinik jeden Tag. Also ich habe mein Leben lang nie gemalt, nie geschnitzt oder sonst etwas gemacht. Und als ich im Januar gekommen bin, habe ich am Anfang nur gestrickt, gelismet. Ja. Und dann irgendwann ist es mir langweilig geworden, den ganzen Tag lismen. Und dann habe ich angefangen, mal mit Holz zu arbeiten. Und vielleicht Februar, März. Und dort ist dann wirklich meine Leidenschaft für gekommen. Und jetzt ist das für mich ein absoluter Halt. Wenn ich unruhig bin, gibt mir sehr viel Ruhe. Ich habe sehr viel von meinen Gedanken während dem Zeichnen, als ich wegkomme. Und ja, bedeutet mir heute alles. Die meisten Bilder von mir sind x-mal übermalt. Ich habe relativ hohe Ansprüche an mich. Und manchmal fällt es mir dann ein bisschen schwer zu sagen, jetzt ist es gut. Manchmal muss ich dann einfach hören und sagen, es ist gut. Oder manchmal stimmt es dann auch nicht so emotional. In meinen Bildern hat es wahnsinnig viel verarbeitet von dem, was ich erlebt habe. Das Thema Kloster, Klosterfrauen kommt immer wieder, im Moment noch. Das ist auch wieder so ein Teil von meinem Leben, den ich verarbeite. Wenn ich das Zeichnen da nicht gefunden hätte und das Schnitzen, wäre ich nie so weit, wie ich jetzt bin. Da bin ich ganz sicher. Also das ist, ich fühle teilweise, ich habe 15 bis 20 Stunden Schlaf, sehr wenig. Oder Schnitzen. Ich glaube, die Menschen, die hier arbeiten für sich. Arbeiten für sich, damit sie ihre Sorgen oder Probleme, die sie haben, mit verarbeiten können oder vielleicht ein bisschen vergessen. Und im Gegensatz vielleicht zu draussen ist der Konkurrenzkampf nicht da. Also ich lerne mich einfach auf eine andere Seite kennen. Vorher war es bei mir immer sehr aktiv, immer voll gearbeitet, habe eine Mutter, die wenig Freizeit, die ich bei ihr verbracht habe. Die Familie ist absolut im Vordergrund gestanden und ich habe mich bei allem zurückgenommen. Durch meine Erlebnisse, die ich letztes Jahr und meine Geschichte sehr unruhig. Und da finde ich es auch schön im Living Museum. Da hast du Menschen, wo jeder sein Rucksäckchen trägt, jeder und da einen Ort findet, wo er im Berufsleben oder Alltagsleben daheim nicht hat. Ich bin sehr gerne da. Ich nutze die ganze Zeit, die ich da sein kann. Also ich komme am Morgen wirklich früh und bis am Abend, wo ich bleibe. Wenn ich auch froh bin, wenn ich Zeiten habe, wo es mir nicht so gut geht, kann ich auch gehen. Also dann bin ich von außen unterwegs, mache vielleicht auch gar nichts. Aber ich habe den Druck nicht, dass ich unbedingt etwas machen muss, sondern ich kann dann machen, wenn es geht. Und was ich auch schön finde, ist auch Freundschaften, die entstanden sind. Es sind wenig Freundschaften, aber es sind 2, 3 Leute, wo ich bis heute Kontakt habe, engen Kontakt. Wo ich auch merke, mit denen oder die können mich vielleicht ein bisschen mehr verstehen. Wieso mag ich jetzt nicht reden? Oder es gibt auch Zeiten, wo ich auch gar keine Antwort mehr gebe, wenn mir jemand schreibt. Und das sind die Menschen, die ich hier kennengelernt habe, die das absolut grad akzeptieren können, was andere vielleicht nicht haben. Oder auch Musik zum Beispiel. Eindrücklich, wenn ich da wieder zulasse, wie es Menschen gibt, die du vielleicht auf den ersten Moment gar nicht so denkst, wenn du siehst. Und nachher hörst du ihn singen oder siehst, wenn er sonst etwas gestaltet. Das ist sehr eindrücklich. Also wenn ich ein Bild fertig habe, wo ich dann noch zufrieden bin, dann ist es wirklich ein schönes Gefühl. Und irgendwo gibt es mir auch einen gewissen Stolz, dass ich das überhaupt kann. Und man ist fast ein bisschen selber staunen. Oder mir, wenn ich vielleicht wieder ein Bild mal denke, wie hast du jetzt das dort angebracht? Wie habe ich jetzt das gemacht, weil mir etwas gut gefallen hat? Ich habe es auch aufgehängt daheim, hätte ich mir nie vorstellen können. Als ich hier angefangen zu malen, ich dachte, würde ich eh nie aufhängen, meine Bilder. Mein Ziel beruflich weiss ich noch nicht. Ich glaube aber wieder, dass ich in die Pflege werde gehen. Das heisst, wahrscheinlich im Behindertenbereich. Und was auch noch so ein Ziel ist, das ich arbeite, ist irgendwann einmal bei uns, wo ich wohne. Im Dorf haben wir die Möglichkeit zum Ausstellen, dass ich dort einmal ausstellen kann.
So thank you very much for listening to this incredible, touching portrait of Corinna Schleuninger. And now I have also a very special treat for you, our living session band. It's an amazing formation. They are practicing for so many years now together and developing one song after the other. And we at the Living Museum here in Wien are so proud of them. They have concert in whole Switzerland and are about to produce a CD. So now enjoy, and if you can, dance.
Ladies and gentlemen, a nice hello from Switzerland to Brazil. It's a great pleasure for us to play with you, for you. Our name is Living Session Band. Nice to meet you. gentlemen, hello Brazil. Nice to meet you. Our band name is Lyrics and Band. First guitar is Renato Müller. Danny the bass man. Thomas on the drums. And Marco the second guitar. My name is Božić. Nice to meet you, Brazil. And now, come Freddie to sing with me a song. Thank you, Freddie. great.
Thank you, Bully.
Yeah. Hey, Brazil. Your great export is samba. We try to make it, but we cannot make it better, but we try to do it. Yeah.
Oh, guys, what a marvelous band. Did you guys like it too? Did you like it as much as I did? If you did, stay here. They'll be back. They'll be back soon. It's a beautiful initiative, beautiful work, and I think you were able to feel it too. both in the plastic sense and the music itself. I'd like to thank deeply to Dotosi and all the artists that were here and showed the work that they create, which I imagine is as marvelous as the moment we just participated in. Now, we will have a video that talks a little bit more about this philosophy that's developed by the Dr. Alexander von Tabby. It has a few minutes.
The Living Museum is a space in society where people with mental illness come and they change their identity from a crazy person to a crazy artist. And the product of it is beautiful art. So this Living Museum is to be thought as a visionary utopian space for people who then create in this space and in their freedom beautiful art. When it was first founded by Dr. Marton and his friend, his Polish painter friend, Bolek Jasinski, it was actually not about the art that they thought in the first place, but it was about changing identity, and it was about the miracle or the utopian possibility of the human spirit that can be moved from one maybe stale state into life. And at first it was a vision. It was not to have these people produce art. And Bolek always wanted to deprive the regular art market of the art here. He didn't want to sell it. He said, is it world and of the world of possibilities and change. That people have come to the height of artistic expression here is mainly because they stay so long, they have such a focus on what they do and such an investment, passionate investment in their works, that now you have here works that you are really finding better than things that a visit in the Museum of Modern Art. Where these artists here who do live with mental illness, they have an inner world that they have an urge to turn outside. It doesn't want to come out because it wants to be shown or it wants to be sold. It's a work. They work on constant movement, which goes through them, and they have the total freedom here to express what they want, to use any material what they want. And to be really themselves completely. There's no therapy. The word therapy is not liked here because we think that what we do, who work with these people, we are their friends. We are giving them nothing else than kindness. Kindness is probably the most important virtue that's being experienced here. And people who come in, they sense a different energy. This is a place we call utopian space because it has no jealousy, it has no envy. The artists are helpful to each other. If someone comes in and asks for advice, advice is given, help is given, individual needs are met. We think of it as a model that should eventually become a model for society at large. As the great German painter Joseph Beuys has seen it, everybody can turn his or her trauma into something beautiful. There are lots of offsprings all over the world. In Switzerland was the first. Then now we are in South Korea. The model is being copied in South Korea, in Indonesia, there are plans in two others in Switzerland. There are plans for opening a place like this in Spain. I'm going to open one in Austria because the idea and the vision is successful. It is successful for people who used to live outside of society, stigmatized. The rest of the world is afraid of them. There's a lot of tension, and here they have a place, and it's full of creativity, it's accepted, and now more and more people want to live in such places.
Incredible, guys. Fabulous. Dr. Alexandra was the curator of the Living Museum in New York, and yesterday we received a video from Joseph Gomes, who is in the Living Museum of Switzerland now, and Dr. Rose showed a little bit of his work live to us. And now we are going to our conversation circle on philosophies of care. The mediation is going to be held by Eduardo Torre, who is a doctor in public health and a psychologist at CAPS, Open Space Time, at the Municipal Institute Nice da Silveira, in Rio de Janeiro.
Bom dia.
Hi, Eduardo.
Tudo bem?
Good morning.
Obrigado, Elielton.
It's all good. Thank you for having me here.
E todas.
I'm the one to thank you for being here. Thank you, everyone.
Muito obrigado pela apresentação.
I'm sorry. I just presented you very briefly about your work on copies at the Municipal Institute Nice da Silveira, and now the floor is yours to mediate the table, okay?
Muito obrigado, Elielton. Bom dia a todos.
Thank you so much, Elielton. Good morning, everyone. It's an enormous pleasure to be here.
No segundo seminário Cultura e Saúde.
Loco, Juquery, the second seminar of Culture and Health, a super important event for the psychiatric reform here in Brazil and for culture as well. It's an event that's becoming more and more important for discussion, creation, and debates. We have very important guests here today. And before I begin, I would like to highlight the wonderful presentation of the Living Session Band and the performance of the painters that were there. It's been a wonderful introduction with culture and music. And we are here at this discussion table at the second day of the seminar to reflect on the experiences of culture and artists and the history of psychiatry and the psychiatric reform of the last decades. which represents an entire array, a universe of production and creativity, of artists and pieces, things that are very important in Brazil for the debate in culture and psychiatry. Brazil has a very important expression within this intersection between culture and art, culture and craziness, with cultural expressions with over a century, deeply rounded in Brazil, that's broad in modernism and arts, and still the roots of the contemporary art, as we saw yesterday with Carla Cabanas, who presented a discussion about Osório Cesar and Denise Silveira, who developed two of the experiences that are most known of the 20th century in this intersection between art and madness. And here we've had in the last 2 decades a development of psychiatric reform, which is the social movement, which we call anti-sanatorium movement of human rights here in the country. It's a movement against the fight against social exclusion in pro of liberty and a society without sanatoriums. And more than that, a cultural movement that's extremely powerful with social participation, with a social production that's extremely broad, with with collectives that are participating and fighting for this, creating a new place for culture in the society, for the diversity, and for democracy and human rights. So to debate this intersection between art, culture, and madness, we have some guests here. They're all very special from 3 different institutions, from the Museum of Imagery of Unconsciousness, of the Psychiatric Hospital of Juquery, and the Living Museum. I'm going to present our guests now, who are Dr. Janusz Marto, who is a PhD in psychology and director of the Living Museum since 1995. Also, Dr. Rose Ehman, who is a PhD in art therapy, founder and director of the Ateliers and Living Museum, the Psychiatric Clinic Will, since 2002. Gloria Teresa Chen, who is an art therapist and a pedagogue at the Museum of Images of the Unconscious in Rio de Janeiro, and the Paula Carcosi, who is a psychologist and art therapist, and coordinates a process of social reintegration of the residents of the complex, the Psychiatric Hospital Juquery. We're also going to have Paul Guidiara, who worked in a complex, specialized in the complex of networks and arts of the Living Museum. So we have the 5 guests today for this debate at this conversation table about the philosophy of care. And I'm going to pass the floor now so we can begin our presentations to Dr. Janusz Marko. It's an enormous pleasure having you here. Dr. Janusz, please, the floor is yours.
And we started out. Oh, I'm getting a feedback. So it's very difficult to get a feedback. Is there a way of getting?
I can turn the volume. Go ahead.
Well, you have to roll with the punches when you work in the mental health system. whatever is dished out for you in your country or your particular situation, you have to deal with that. That's what we did in New York, and we did it very successfully for over 30 years. If you guys know the film King of Hearts, that's a good model to think about how this whole thing started at Creedmoor in New York. It's a story when the mentally ill people the hospital, and they run it pretty much like a living museum. At the same time, just a big movie, the whole town is behind and explode any moment during the film. This is kind of the dialectic that you whenever you work with illness, there's always controversy, there's always discrimination. Mentally ill people are probably the most discriminated minority in the world. Mostly discriminated against people who are not even aware of the dimension of discrimination, which is psychophobia. Most of us are aware of racism, sexism. We might even recognize it in ourselves, but when it comes to psychophobia, we are innocent. And as innocent people, they can be very dangerous. In New York, we were very successful in a safe space, and yes, an asylum. You mentioned that you are fighting against the idea of sanatoriums. You want to liberate people from the sanatoriums, and I would like to put Oliver Sacks in this context, who wanted before his death. He used to come to the Living Museum. He wanted to have certain aspects of the oldest rejuvenated for which is protection, asylum, and that is the idea of living. I would like to mention three important aspects for our work and for work with people with mental illness, and that constitutes also the underlying philosophy, is that extreme creativity is, in my mind, of severe mental illness. And this is probably one of the aspects, positive aspects of mental illness, and you can build upon that. I think that people with mental illness create authentic art automatically. It's to get there, most of the regular artists, successful artists, cheat, drugs, alcohol, all kinds of things to get to the spot where people who struggle with mental illness automatically are at. The second point, which is very, very important, and people don't know about, is that people with mental illness are nice. You know, it's if you create an environment, a family environment, this niceness will occur and create a space, as Alexandra mentioned. And the third time, it's very important for our complete work. The biggest problem with people who are institutionalized, and also even if they live outside or at home, is that people have too much time on their hands. But when you are not what you need, a lot of time, and you have to channel energy, and create beautiful art. That's the solution. A last aspect that I'd like to people to check into is the German artist who I particularly like, is Joseph Beuys. He was a big influence in the 70s in the world of art. He connected healing and art in a very successful way. Modern psychiatry doesn't have the concept of healing. We talk about stabilization, and to resurrect the idea of healing is very, very important. And then the last thing, I would like to turn over the time to Paul Hodera here, director of the Living Museum in the cyberspace. In COVID, we were forced to move into cyberspace, which is, for my take, advantage, because I always want to have a representation there, not just to be able to communicate across boundaries and across continents, but also because of many great advantages when you are on the internet. And so Paul has been in charge of all cyber space activities at the museum, and I would like him to say a couple of things about that.
Thank you. First, I'd like to give you a bit of background. My education was in the arts, digital communications, and network security. I retired about 3 years ago and began volunteering at the Living Museum, which has been an incredible experience for me. My down many preconceptions regarding mental illness. The principles, as I see them, are respect, trust, and cooperation. And as Dr. Yano, creating a safe environment where clients can express their passions and subdue their mental illness. We have a true community, strong bonds, and even during COVID shutdowns, these bonds remain between phone calls and through our collective Zoom. Zooming 7 days a week, 3 hours a day, has been a lifeline for clients, for volunteers, and for staff. And what it's proven to me is that we built a true community. Dr. Martin has built a true community. That even because of the shutdowns, people remain together. They express their artwork online. They communicate individually through phone calls. With the advent of communication technologies, I'm really excited about the possibilities of our community enlarging and joining with other like-minded communities throughout the world and exchanging local cultural and concepts, bridged together through the common tongue of artwork. And Zoom has been our first step, and we're looking to other additional steps we can take to use technology to continue this growing and connective process. Thank you.
Obrigado, Dr. Janos. Obrigado, Paul.
Thank you, Dr. Janos and Paul.
Pela fala de vocês, falando pouco sobre o Living Museum.
For what you said, a little bit about the Living Museum. I'm going to now pass the floor
Por favor, Rose.
to Rose Ehrman. Please, Rose, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much. The first time I entered the Living Museum in New York, I was blown away by this extremely outburst of creativity. And soon I felt home. It's a place of warmth. It's a place where people with mental illness come and create the most incredible things. And I was always looking for a place like that in my life. I started art therapy, but soon I realized I don't want to do the art therapy in the traditional sense of psychoanalytic interpretations, for example, which I think is great too. But I grew up on a farm and had no parental limitations. And in my professional field, I always looked out for places without limitations, with the most freedom I could get. And I found this place at the Living Museum, New York. And it transformed my whole personality, basically, and not only I know that many people come there and they transform their lives. And it's also happening here in Switzerland. It's the same process. And I soon know that I wanted to have and build up an own living museum in Europe. And it happened to be here in Switzerland. And I know also Rocha from the Living Museum Holland. He also had the same feeling, and he's a great power also in bringing the idea also into the global world. And we now have a Living Museum Society, and we try to help up to build living museums all over Europe. And it's also happening. It's that we have now 15 living museums who are operating, and 30 more are planned to be built up. So it's exciting. And I thank everyone who is involved in this kind of art movement. And Janusz always had the vision of that artists with mental illness should connect globally, and also the cyberspace is helping, but we also had an exhibition, Transutopia, in 2017, where artists from the living museums from all over the world came to Switzerland and worked with us together on a huge exhibition. And so many people came to see the show, and for everybody involved, it was such an unforgettable moment. There's also Jennifer from Korea. She opened up the first one in Asia and helps building up living museums in the Asian room, and also Dr. Alexandra von Plettenberg, who helps building up living museums also in Austria, France, and wherever her path goes. So I want to thank everybody who helps spreading out the idea, because I think that this is a great solution for our whole society, and especially because it has the power to transform and heal our society. Yeah, and here I have the great advantage that I'm embedded in a psychiatric institution who really supports us to a great extent. And also I have a great team around me, working with me, helping me, doing shows. And I want to thank everybody who comes to the Living Museum, especially, of course, our artists who come on a daily basis, who inspire me personally and make me develop further. And I think it's very, I'm so fascinated. Every single day I come here to the Living Museum, I experience different things. I experience different kinds of behavior, human behavior. I experience incredible varieties of human expressions, and it's transforming all the time. Also, the Living Museum Wheel here is transforming. It's expanding. The Living Museum Wheel is it has 3 places here on the same campus. It's Tagesstätte of Heimstättenwil, then there's Naturatelier, also of the clinic, and we work together as Living Museum Wheel, and it's amazing what all this human power can bring along if it comes to exhibitions and projects. And I want to thank Janusz for all that I could learn from him, and I still do. And I hope that a lot of people get inspired by this day here to be able to open up more living museums on a global scale.
Muito obrigado, Rose.
Thank you so much, Rose. I am going to tell a little bit more about this fabulous experience of the Living Museum and share it with us here in Brazil. After Janusz and Paul's talk, this fabulous experience of the Living Museum that inspires us and helps us so much in these last few years that we've had many setbacks in the psychiatric reform. We're going through tons of difficulty here due to the pandemic, and it's important for us to get back this legacy that we received, and they were so creative of social inclusion and participation, so that we have references, so that we can produce the necessary changes and continue making the social changing of madness and diversity. And so we thank so much for everything that you've shared directly from New York. with Paul
diretamente da
and
Suíça
Janus,
com
and
Rose.
directly from
Obrigado a
Switzerland with
vocês.
Rose.
Agora
Thank you
vamos
so much.
passar para
Now,
as experiências brasileiras
we move
que estão
to the Brazilian
representadas
experiences
hoje, e
that
eu
are
vou
here
passar a palavra
represented
então
today. And so now I
para a
pass the
Glória Teresa
floor
Chan, do Museu de
to
Imagens do Inconsciente do
Gloria
Rio de
Teresa
Janeiro.
Chan, who
Glória,
is
por
of
favor.
the Unconscious Museum in Rio de Janeiro, Museum of Images of the Unconscious. Thank you so much, Eduardo. Good morning. It's an enormous pleasure and honor to participate in this event representing the team of the Museum of Images and Unconscious since 2003. So that we talk about this function of the development of creativity that's developed by the customers and how this perception happens. I want to bring to you and show you, tell you how this happens. I didn't bring a video presenting how it happens, but I'm going to tell you what the scenario is in which these processes occur. It's essential that before we begin, we talk about how everything began. It began when the psychiatrist Nice da Silveira arrived here at the old psychiatrist center Pedro II in the 40s and found two interns having reclusion treatment with electroshocks, insulin therapy, and even lobotomy. With the help of a young staff worker who was also an artist, they created an entire word of art therapy as culture, as a way of expression. Each patient that arrived at this occupational therapy ward would always come with a referral from the doctor. The initial production was so intense, so rich, both aesthetically and in its scientific expression, that the need for systemizing this to store the production arose. And this way, this is how the Museum of Images of the Unconscious was created within the public health department of mental health. And we consider it a living museum, and its production grows daily. Since the therapy services that we held until today, we have as priority the environment of the atelier to be welcoming, warm, that the person is welcomed, and that it's safe and the person feels they belong. Our work is of living together. Many of our customers have gone through the experience of being an intern, may it be short or long, and many of them have traumas within from that time. And as they go through these expressive ateliers, they can bring new meaning to these moments. Most of them live at their own homes. They're not in the hospital system anymore. And in this way, in the ateliers, we believe that art will hold a very important role, which is the confirmation that the creativity is intact. And what is actually ill is the ego. And so we also notice that the unconscious has strengths that are self-healing, that are mobilized when this long door of art is open, which dives in to get back these people that are found sunken into their own abyss. Art comes in to add new forms of communication and beyond the verbal communication. In our ateliers at the museum, we have many different types of communication and languages. May it be painting in all its forms, or drawing with a color pencil, or a crayon, or a graffiti pencil. Also embroidery, and the production of texts, and tapestry. And we have a project of a newspaper, calling it a little newspaper, or just a news in form is the kind way of calling it. And we've been introducing new media as a form of expression. The drawing in computers production of text in the computers, the use of cell phones to take pictures and create interventions about photography files, also producing videos and other activities on the cell phone. I'd also like to say that we have a multidisciplinary team. We have psychiatrists, psychologists, art therapists, people from the social universities, and what enriches our work and also brings variety into the customer's world. We also receive interns from psychology, nursing, visual arts, and researchers that bring a lot of contribution to our everyday life. We have a researcher, for example, who is studying her doctorship. She is an actress and she is making a comparison between Nice and Artaud, and she offers weekly activities for our interns, our customers. She now, during the pandemic, is providing the same work through WhatsApp. We talk a lot about art, but our work is a therapeutic one mainly, and the images that are produced start in the unconscious of each of our customers, either related to the moment they're living or related to their history and their emotional history, which is sensitive and fragile. Many of these emotions are highly aesthetic, being considered artwork. But before it being art, they are part of an imagery production of these people, of contents, of scientific interests that may be base for many scientific research. I will talk a little bit about how the customer enters this work. Most of them live in their own homes. They arrive from many different regions of the city of Rio de Janeiro, always referred by their therapist or a doctor. Either they come from the CAPS or the hospital, or by a referral from a private doctor. We have meetings with these teams so that we understand the person's history. Why is it that they believe the museum will help, our work will help this person's therapeutic process? And then in another moment, the museum's team runs an assessment, a broad one. What does this mean? We call the family together to understand not only the symptom, but also the history of each one, how their relationships are, what are the family conditions, what are the distresses in that person's life, and can they count on a network, a support network? And from there, we start creating a therapeutic project for each customer. Once this is defined, the customer, we call them customers, okay? They start going to our atelier according to a schedule. And as they come in and continue their production, apart from stimulating their autonomy, it also contributes to them finding their singular way of expression, which is presenting their memories, their emotions, or past or present situations. When they are welcomed with this connection being created, they dissolve their defenses, their fears, and their distrusts, making it possible for creativity to go over their ill ego. We also try to understand in which atelier, which material they will start with, so that they can express themselves in a more fluid way. And from one material, they can go into an array of possibilities. They have that possibility, that choice. They are going to understand that everything has a beginning, middle, and end. Each technique has its own time. And with this process of continuity, they start creating a consciousness of themselves as a whole through time, which often was cut off in the past. This process supports their timeline of their existence. The team and themselves can notice and understand through their actions and their demands the need to eliminate what causes compulsion, affliction, or agony. Once these images are created, what they paint, draw, their gests, their texts come through their capacity of creating. It comes from a healthy place that's full of symbolism and pinpoint to the emotional state that motivated them to the moment of creation or that they carry throughout their lives. These are productions that offer the possibility, as I mentioned before, for these self-healing forces that self-regulate of our unconscious to start to launch and try to organize themselves, presenting a number of states of the being, the many ways we can be here in the world, of telling your own history and tell your story and their myths. And the more they talk about it, these contents are elaborated and re-elaborated and building on themselves. Once we do this, we start pulling the thread of this entire bundle. And in this, we always go back to Nice da Silveira, who is our reference, observing if there is a contour to the work, if there's layers and layers of paint, or if maybe after many chaotic images have been introduced, they start producing images that are more organized. So it's always important to see what's going on in their everyday life in parallel to the process that we're doing therapeutically and expression-wise. We don't interpret the images. We don't have that line of work in the therapy here in the atelier. But we ask the author what they wanted to present with that image, with their work, with their piece. And they're the ones that guide us. And then we put together the symbols with their life story. And then we start to unravel the knots. After that, we go for many different knowledges, culture, folklore, to try to find a parallel that connects us to a path that we can continue on. We also understand that the artistic work makes the expression of this customer easier, little by little, and they start restructuring themselves and participating in the ateliers, also takes part in their process of insertion in the world. We also can have to talk about the emotion of dealing. This was a term that was conjured by one of the persons that worked with Nisi da Silveira. Each material has a specific emotion to each one. The touch to wood has one, to mud and clay another, with aquarella another, with watercolor another, with graffiti it's something else. The emotion is fabulous, but what is fabulous for one person can be inhibiting for another person. That's why each one chooses their own way of expression and what material is going to be more fluid to express themselves through. So watercolor allows you to flow. Clay brings the person that is having a fit back to earth. So each material is going to have one function that is their partner in this recreation of their reconstruction of their ego. And in time, they notice these subtleties and these demands, what scares them when it is put into a piece of paper or clay, creates a dimension that they can have control over. And now, during the pandemic, we were not able to continue with this in-person contact. We had to create a new way of running the activities, which is totally remote. The therapeutic team is offering follow-up through electronic means, cell phone, WhatsApp, phone, and we have weekly meetings through Zoom or video calls so that we can follow up each case of our customers. and they are receiving at home all the material that they need to continue their activities that they used to develop at the ateliers. So we have a remote follow-up. We follow up what's being produced. We send pictures from the cell phone, and that way we see what's being produced and we can follow up on them. And we are going to have all this material is going to be stored, and later on we are going to develop a study with the effects of the pandemic on this lack of in-person contact. So this is a brief description of how we develop our work. And all of this summarizes into what we call the Nice da Silveira method: clean environments that are welcoming, organized, silence in the environment so that we can offer free expression and organized expression. They also have technical guidance. For example, I am an artist, plastic artist, but we don't have art classes, but how you can deal with that material. And what they're going to produce is fully of each one's choice and their free expression. And what ties everything together is what we call, and what Nietzsche called, the catalytic affection. We try looking at this in a very broad way. Each therapist has their own expertise, but we study, we exchange our thoughts. And what's interesting is that it's not the technician that chooses it, the customer, but the customer chooses us. And this optimizes their process of expression and creation. This is a daily learning process. The ateliers are our school, and these customers are our masters. This is how we develop our work on a daily basis. And now in the pandemic, we are reinventing it on a daily basis as well. That's what I wanted to bring to you. Thank you so much.
Muito obrigado, Glória.
Thank you so much, Gloria, for what you said. The Museum of Images of the Unconscious is a unique experience with an enormous
legado
archive.
país e para o mundo.
It is essential in the country and the world as well. So thank you so much for what you said. And I'd like to keep in mind, everybody keep in mind that we have simultaneous translation, English and Portuguese, and 2 different links on YouTube. And they are open for participation in the chat box with our excellent team here from the Soy Loco Porti. Juquery is going to select so we can have an interaction with our audience. So now I'd like to thank Gloria, and I'm going to pass the floor to Paula Karkowski from the Psychiatric Hospital of Juquery. The floor is yours.
Não estamos te ouvindo.
We can't hear you, Paula.
Você está nos ouvindo bem, né?
You can hear us well, right, Paula?
Não está chegando para a gente o seu áudio.
We're not getting your audio.
Opa, ó.
I think now we're almost there.
Mau contato? Acho que ainda não.
We still can't hear you.
Será que sem fone você consegue?
Could you maybe try taking off your headset? Paula?
Evento ao vivo, digital.
We're here live on the digital platform.
A equipe está checando o som.
The team is double checking the sound.
Fala alguma coisa, Paula. Não. Vou falar um pouquinho, então, enquanto a equipe
So,
checa
while
a
the
transmissão da
team
Paula,
is checking Paula's sound transmission, I'm going to talk a little
muito
bit.
importante frisar a
It's
riqueza
very
dessas
important to highlight
experiências
the
de
richness
arte
of
e
these
cultura,
experiences
produção
of art and
sociocultural,
culture
não
and
só no
social
movimento da
cultural
reforma
production,
psiquiátrica
not
no
only
Brasil e
in
em
the
outros
movement
países,
of the
mas
psychiatric
também
reform in Brazil and other
fora do
countries,
movimento
but
da reforma
also
psiquiátrica como expressões
up
culturais,
out of
artísticas,
this moment as
e
artistic
das artes
cultural
em geral.
productions in the
Então nós
field
temos
of
uma
the arts and
multiplicidade de
cultures in
linguagens
general.
artísticas
So we have a
e
multiplicity
produções que
of
é
expressions
extremamente
and
rica
productions that
e
is
que
super
inclui
rich and includes
blocos de carnaval, literatura, música,
carnival
pintura,
blocks,
escultura,
literature,
desenho,
music,
grupos de geração de renda
sculpture,
multissectária,
drawings,
centros de
the
convivência e
groups
cultura,
of
os pontos de cultura
solidarity,
da gestão de diversas
creation
ações,
for
por exemplo,
economy,
isso
the
tão
points
importante,
of
ateliês
creation
de
of
arte,
culture
produzidos
during the
inclusivos, centros
minister Gilberto
culturais, atos
Gil, when he
públicos,
was minister,
shows, o Dia da Luta
public acts,
Antimanicomial, que é 26 de
concerts,
maio,
the day
tantas
of
outras
the fight
expressões
against
que
the
compõem
sanatoriums,
essa
so many
pujança
things
de obras, artistas,
that
grupos, que têm sido
create this
fundamentais
enormous
para a
array of
luta
artists and
antimanicomial e também para a
pieces that have
produção
been so
das
important for
artes,
our fight
deslocando o lugar da
against
doença,
sanatoriums,
produzindo outros lugares possíveis para os
taking
sujeitos, outras possibilidades de
out the
vida,
place of illness,
que
creating
são
other
terapêuticos,
spaces
mas que
for
são
these
também
subjects.
políticos,
These
éticos,
are therapeutic
transformação de
spaces, but they're also
subjetividades,
political,
ampliação da
ethical, the
sexualidade,
transformation of
que fazem com que a gente
subjectiveness
tenha uma
and their
redefinição
accessibility,
não
which
só da noção
makes
de
us
loucura,
have
mas
a
do campo das
redefinition of our
artes,
idea
a
of
ideia do que
madness,
é
but
produzir
also
arte, produzir
the field
obras,
of arts.
para
What
além
is
dos
it to produce
formalismos
arts,
escolásticos,
art
para além
pieces,
dos
apart
lugares
from the
institucionalizados de
what is
cultura, de
formal and the
arte, como as
institutional
galerias de
spaces for
arte
culture and
e
art,
assim por
as the
diante.
art
Então,
galleries
têm sido
are,
experiências
and so on.
fundamentais e os museus
So these have been
e
essential
exposições de arte
experiences,
têm
and the
feito parte
museums
desse
and
diálogo
spaces
com a
of
sociedade,
expositions
dessas
have been part of this
formas de
dialogue with the
transformação da
society
relação com a
in
loucura.
ways of
E
transformation
dentro desse
of
universo,
art
o
with
Living
madness.
Museum,
And
que está em
within
vários
this
países,
universe, the
o
Living
Museu de
Museum,
Imagens do
which is in many
Inconscientes,
different
e a
countries,
experiência
the
de Juquery, que
Museum of
também é
Images of the
referencial no
Unconscious,
país,
and the
e
Juquery's experience,
internacionalmente,
which is
com um
also a
acervo
reference in the
enorme,
country and internationally,
e
with an
que
enormous
começou com a
archive,
experiência do
which
Osório Cesar
started
e algumas outras
with Lázaro
raízes dessa
Cesar's
experiência, mas que
experience and
posteriormente
other
se
roots of that
desenvolveram de
experience, but
inúmeras
then later
formas,
on developed
como por
themselves
exemplo
in
vamos
many
ter
different
aqui no
ways,
festival Soy Loco,
like the one that we're having
e
here
outras
at the
tantas
festival, So
produções
Loco por
do
Ti
Museu de
Juquery,
Arte Osório
and
Cesar e
so
as
many
outras instituições
others
parceiras que estão
productions that we've
fomentando esse
seen and
evento
institutions that are
e esse
partners that
movimento.
are supporting
Paula,
this
está me
event
ouvindo
and
bem?
movement. Paula, can you hear me now?
Não sei se estão te ouvindo.
I'm sorry, I don't know if they can hear you or not.
Acho que ainda estamos tentando.
I think we're still trying.
Olha, nós temos algumas perguntas no chat.
We have here some questions at the
E
chat
nós já vamos
box,
resolver para a Paula poder fazer a sua
and
apresentação.
we are going to fix this sound issue for
Peço
Paula to
compreensão
present.
por mais alguns instantes.
I'd like to thank you
Como eu
and
estava falando,
thank you for your
essa é uma fala que eu ia
comprehension as
fazer
well.
depois
But as I was
da
saying, this was
exposição da
something that I
Paula,
was going to
e já
talk
estou
about
adiantando
later
para a gente
after Paula
fomentar o
spoke,
debate.
but I'm just going to
Então,
move it forward so
é
that we
importante
can have a
conseguir
basis for our
reconhecer
debate. It's super important to recognize the importance and the relevance, social relevance, and this size of this research field of art, culture, and madness, the amount of successful experiences, because before so many difficulties in the mental illness field with the public health departments and the attacks we've suffered to human rights, to universal rights for health and social assistance, it's important and essential that we understand how many successful experiences we've had in the country to strengthen these movements of change in the psychiatric realm. I work at the CAPS. I am a professional of mental health. I'm inserted at the network here for this support in Rio de Janeiro. I work at the CAPS, Espaço Aberto ao Tempo, Open Space to Time. It's a CAPS that is known for the use of multiple artistic language. And I also had a thesis associated to the Oswaldo Cruz Association in Rio de Janeiro through the Lab of Studies and Research of Mental Health of the National School of Public Health. It was supported by the Paulo Amarante professor, who is going to be speaking to us on Saturday. And the work came from the work Crazy About Diversity, Mad About Diversity, which was a project in 2007, identified many different expressions and works with this type of work. And from the time that we had Gilberto Gil in the ministry, this was an extremely innovative project, Madness for Diversity, and it made possible my thesis, making it possible for many different groups at the psychiatric reform. So I'm bringing some of these ways of working, which demonstrate a multiplicity of experience. There are many diverse festivals like the one we are at now. We also have other festivals throughout the country that have happened in many decades, like the Madness event in Barbacena, the ones mad about music. We have many experiences for art expositions in museums, hundreds and thousands of events with culture, and these have been essential throughout the country so we can continue with our experiences and the scenario of the psychiatric reform in Brazil. Paula, can you hear us? Now I can hear you. Ah, great. I'm so relieved.
Isso. Eu vou então
Yay.
deixar as
So,
perguntas para depois da
I'm going to
apresentação
leave
da
the
Paula. Então
questions
agora
for
com
later
vocês,
after her presentation.
muito
Now the
prazer.
floor is yours
Pedimos a fala
with
da Paula.
enormous honor
Peço,
and
por favor,
pleasure.
Paula.
Paula
A palavra é
Carcuz.
sua agora. Vamos em frente.
Now the floor is yours, Paula. Thank you so much. I am so sorry for all the difficulties that I had. If there is no emotion, it's not fun, right? No pain, no gain. I think here it's important to talk about our experiences, and what we have most important in Juquery now is that we work with an audience that has been with us for many years, and our mission is to get them back into society. We have our audience is elderly, and they've been in the institution for a very long time. And because of that, we have to embrace a series of issues that are critical of Juquery. So we have a series of activities that seek to meet these needs. And I think we can establish a routine in which we suggest all types of stimuli that maybe for a long time they were deprived of. So we know how much to be in the institution itself is a delicate issue. And our suggestion, our proposition is that they have the most in terms of individuality, in terms of searches, in terms of choices. And so that's a little bit of what we have been proposing. I'd like to show a video, and after the video, I think we could talk a little bit more about this. On the same day that we celebrate the fight against the sanatoriums, we're moving towards the 123rd year with the psychiatric hospital Juquery and its anniversary. Paths in art therapy. Today, it's 39 that are here with us, and then out of these 39, there are almost all of them over 60. These people have been with us with an average of 32 years in the institution. So it's an institutionalized environment, and apart from the age is also an issue. So we need to also consider their particularities and the demands that are specific. Within the many diverse therapeutic propositions that exist in the hospital, art therapy has been shown itself as very important and successful. The recovery of abilities, many times they were lost throughout the course of the institutionalization, that they done through simple activities that are guided and conducted by the team and gets them in a receptive way, stimulating the activity and participating through colors, textures, and diverse materials, slowly introduce and favors the development of the motor functions, sensorial functions, cognitive functions for each of them as they are new here, to challenge them. I help in the workshops, and I think that it's important, each one of them in their own way. They're happier, they're more developed, they go here and there. Each one can do their own thing with what they have. A work that's satisfactory to them. They will look and they say, look, I did this, and they really did do it. That's it. The activities often are also done in their bed, where the person are, so we adequate it to their possibilities. The tapestry workshop is one of activities, and when they share their work, they create stories and they laugh and they create confidence in themselves and create new perspectives and a new look. The workshops bring the patient and their connection closer. It's an alternative to access the patient. Often, when they're institutionalized, we have this duty to bring content. And the workshop, for example, here that we run of the newspaper, we can interact with the patients in a constructive way. In the afternoon, Thursday afternoons, there are therapy workshop are in the Liberty space and welcoming space. The ones who live come spontaneously, and they stay there because they like it. This search for the final product or the aesthetics, but for the process itself, the choice of color, the brush strikes, these are all characteristics and peculiarities that makes us identify the author of the piece, that tells us at each meeting and provide new meanings to their work. They always put name, date, and put it in the archive, providing us the possibility of following each one's path. patient singing. And in this path, we don't move forward nor backwards. We go next to each other, observing and learning. The partnerships that are created are also essential. And the city has been an excellent partner in this sense, and more, the interns are being reinserted into society to which they belong and never should have left. That's it. I think you can have a little bit of the dimension of what our audience is and how much it is important to be able to choose a color. Choose going before the mirror and put on lipstick. There are a series of activities that make sense in Juquery for the audience that we have now, and how much they are going after this process of providing a new meaning to what this hospitalization process was, our challenges and the things we conquer occur on a daily basis, and how much has passed when we lose our liberty, and how much liberty have when we start living with these gentlemen and ladies that have the strength and resilience that are just remarkable and admirable. And I think that's what makes us more and more think about new propositions in a partnership, as we've seen in the video, of more and more them having activities that also happen outside of the hospital. So they participate in workshops that belong to the community. Well, not in the pandemic. Now everything is suspended, of course, but we have partnerships that are very important with the city. And the proposition is that they produce items that can be put at the city's store, and they can follow us in this process. Even when we consider the process of seeing their product being valued, does money mean? Because sometimes even that is lost along the way. So it is something that we are recovering. It's intense. It is hard, but it brings us a lot of pleasure. And to see how much they are willing and ready to return to life and continue on. Wonderful, Paula. Thank you. Fabulous. Your availability, what you said. Congratulations to the organization, all the institutions that are organizing this festival, our guests at this super rich table that we have here in the morning at the second day of our festival. And this is going to be a debate that demonstrates the importance of these experiences of art and culture and social participation being done in Brazil and abroad, that allow us to think that to deconstruct the sanatorium can't be done only with the physical deconstruction, operational deconstruction of these operations. The deconstruction of the sanatorium, as Fernando Bazari said, goes beyond its walls. As we can transform society and how society sees madness, the ways of these individuals participating in these experiences have been showing the protagonism of the individuals, the changes, and the possibility that society can transform its view on mental illness. This has produced a more inclusive, democratic society, more open to cultural diversity in its own. So we have a super rich table here. The participants are just fabulous. And this debate has also made it possible for the individuals to produce a disruption with the place of illness. So moving the idea of mental illness away so that these individuals can see as citizens that have rights, artists that produce culture, that produce art, and that contribute to society, and for it to have an enlarged, a broader sensibility and a new view on inclusion and mental suffering. Also, shifting the look into art as something that is totally institutionalized, as well as creating new ways of creativities and ways of producing art. Now they are produced not only from the conventional place where art is, the idea of the artist as being that person that went to some school and sells its pieces and exposes it in an art gallery. So it's art seen in a broader way, in broadening language and creating power for the inclusion of these individuals into society. So now we're going to pass the questions that we got from the interaction. I'm going to start with the questions that Fabiana Van Lore wrote that's directed to the Living Museum participants. Fabiani would like to know, what is most known or better known around the Living Museum or about the Living Museum? The art pieces or the artists? She wants to know, of these institutions, what was better known from society, the artists or their art? And I'm going to add to this to ask, what is the interaction of the museum with this city, with the life in the city? So, can we start? Who would like to begin? Rose, could you begin?
Yeah, it's hard to tell the question. I think
that
the artists are more well known because the artists, they have such an individual style of art, and our cooperation with the city is that we make exhibitions in Wiel, and the city of Wiel is very open. We can play with all the places, and we had exhibitions in the shops, in the windows, and we try also to connect with the people of the city. And also the Living Museum is open for visitors, so if the people come and look around, they are so overwhelmed by the quality of artworks that all our artists here do show. And but there's, of course, it depends also on how hard one of the artist is working on the art process. Some, they're really totally into it, and they progress fast in their artwork. And some need more time, but that's okay too. It's another expression in the end. And some of our artists became really famous in between, and they are asked for other exhibitions in other galleries. And we have one who also in international exhibits now with his brilliant art. So it's very different. Artists here are in totally different phases and stages, and yeah. But everything here at the Living Museum is important, because this kind of art piece could not develop if not the surrounding would be like it is, like this creative atmosphere, and people can connect to it.
Obrigado, Rose.
Thank you so much, Rose, and for letting us know that there is an interaction with society, that they have many different processes. Now I'm passing the floor to Janos and Paul. The floor is yours, guys.
Yes, Rose's project in Ville is so popular and so successful that we started thinking about the following thing, which is for you guys good to think about, which is that the liberal idea, it mostly comes from America always. It goes to Korea and it's probably going to arrive in Brazil also, is the integrationist idea. That we want to liberate the mentally ill, we want to get rid of the sanatoriums. I think when you say sanatorium, it mean institutions for the mentally ill, and return our patients to society. That's an integrationist liberal idea and a good one. I would like to warn you, however, that this started in the 70s in Italy by Basaglia, and it was a very strong anti-psychiatry movement coming out of Italy, reaching us in America also, and it was a disaster. It did not work. It was bad. It's my opinion. And so the idea of integration versus segregation is a topic that one should think about and think about it in a creative way. Instead of closing all mental hospitals, mental institutions, I would start out smaller. I would secure a building at least on these institutions and start living museums. When I say living museum, it is a frugal
O Living
institution.
Museum
Don't forget, we are one
é uma
staff per one
instituição de
staff
luta.
person.
Nós temos
Over the years, there are
uma
over 100 patients
pessoa
who would
por
come, 1
pessoa
to
para
100.
mais
It
de
was run by
100
the people of
pacientes.
Loco. So real estate and
Então,
art are the same business. So the most important thing is to
tanto
secure a
o
good
negócio imobiliário quanto a arte são a mesma
and
coisa. O
maintain the
importante é
building.
garantir um ambiente
Maintain our
bom,
own
um
building.
prédio bom, e nós mantemos nosso próprio prédio
Which is more on the segregationist side
e
of things.
tem mais
And to go back to Bill and Rose, the outside world should integrate them with us. The Transutopia exhibit was such a crucial experience. Over the weekend, there were over 3,000 people who visited the exhibit there. So they were coming from all over Switzerland, actually in our case, all over the world, to participate in this exhibition. So you have secured a good building, and if you are able to maintain it over the years, which means it's not too expensive, it can be an Archimedean point in culture in general, because there are all these people who create all day 24/7 if necessary, and that can really move at least the art world and the art world, maybe even society at large. So integration has to be a question as a goal.
Obrigado, Janos e Paul.
Thank you so much, Janos and Paul, who also spoke about this relationship between the museum and society, and so many people that participate in the events along the years, and the difficulty of continuing with the work. Now I pass the floor to Gloria and Paula so that they can also mention about this question that was asked by Fabiana here in the chat box, okay? About this question regarding what became more famous, the artists or the art, and how does the interaction between the museums and the atelier, the artistic work with the city, the occupation of the city spaces, and this relationship between what's in and out of the institution. Now, I'm going to pass the floor to Gloria. Well, Fabienne Valmori is well known. We know her a lot. She's researched at the museum already, and she had this deep experience of how the relationship between the customers of the museum and society works. Of course, there still is that lack of that's the little bit that's left of the institutionalization, because many of them spend many years institutionalized and as interns, and for many years, most of them are for many years now with their families at their homes. Some of them are still in the hospitals, maybe because they don't have families, some of them, and so they're still in patients. But what became more important, the art or the artists? I think not it's not a clear line. All of our archive that belongs to the artist or the customers that used to be part of the museum when Dr. Nisi was here, we call it the historical archives, because it was studied by Dr. Nisi, and all the studies described in her books. Also, Luis Carlos Melu's studies, in which he brings Dr. Nisi's path in and describes it as a rebellious doctor. Everything that belongs to this history and time are there, and some of them have been forgotten. There are also movies by Dr. Richard Wiedman. It's also a trilogy that is in the Museum of Imaginary and of Unconscious. So there's all these artists that became more famous because of their art, and their art is associated to them. You can't de-associate one from the other, artist and art. And now in the contemporary moment from 2000 to now, little by little, these people become known. When we create an exposition with the museum's work, we have both the historical part as well as the contemporary part, because the living museum has these aspects and they are inserted in a way that, well, of course, they can't develop a routine as a quote unquote normal citizen would, but they can come and go, they can be about, they can go to many different activities apart from the ones that are offered at the museum. They can go to the Trilhos do Engenho, which is a place for co-living, and everything is kind of on a hold because of the pandemic. So the pandemic brought this hold to everything, but they are well inserted into society, and their art becomes known and is disclosed in these expositions that we show. That's it. Thank you, Gloria, so much. I think what I'm going to say is very similar to what Gloria was saying. I think we have people living here that during the Osório Cesar's time became famous as well because of their work and themselves. And it's a totally different age group and time. I think that the entire city has a very strong relationship with the hospital. So I believe that not only the artist, but the institution itself brings this relationship and identity to the city. Everybody in Franco da Rocha has a story to tell about the Juquery Hospital, psychiatric hospital, either because they worked here or knew someone who worked here or a family member that for some period of time was an inpatient, because this is a city that was created around the psychiatric hospital. So I believe that is the relationship that we have ever since, in the sense, with the institution. Today we have this relationship of bringing this back in the insertion, and little by little people start to understand that the inmates are the inpatients, I'm sorry, are being reinserted and going back to their activities. And some of them also provide and hold workshops together with the society, which is actually what we wanted. We didn't want them to have workshops isolated here, but now they're being able to do that. Some of them have activities. They're going to workshops with teenagers for textile print or creating xylographics, things like that. I think that's it. I think there was an entire path that was built in the sense between the patient and their art and what we have today. And what we expect really is that they are seen and understood as people that are ready to go back. I think that is the identity that we seek for all of them. Not a connection with the art or the Juquery, but with society.
Perfeito, Paula, muito obrigado.
Thank you so much, Paula. We're seeing here, as our spokespersons are speaking, how these cultural and artistic experiences have been powerful to recreate this place of madness and mental suffering in society as a whole, and the city as well, and how these languages have been essential in these spaces for them to be together and exchange have social interactions and creating new social interactions and insertions. And these spaces and experiences have been essential for the possibility for the people that suffer mentally can be seen in a different way. And not only that, but they can also enrich our sensibilities and our expression possibilities beyond the idea of normality that is very poor, that comes from capitalism and psychiatrics. And we've been seeing how these experiences of these institutions and these projects for and broadening the field of mental health and arts. We have one more question here related to the terminology that is used to refer to those who circulate in the spaces for care or cultural production. Is there a reason to call the impatients or artists as customers? This is Kaleg's question in the chat box, and I am going to take the moment to thank the audience that has sent their questions and interacted so kindly in the chat box. And I'm going to pass the floor now to the spokespersons to make their comments about this question and their final remarks, while we wait to see if any other questions come up from the audience. But I'd like to thank for your participation and prepare ourselves to the closing moment of this immensely rich table that we had about the depatholization, the demedication of madness, the destigmatization of those who suffer from mental illness, and the broadening of the understanding of what suffering and vulnerability is, so that we can move towards a more democratic and inclusive society. Janos, a last comment. Janos mentioned Franco Basali's experience in Italy as being a very rich one, but when you go to other countries, it can produce a series of difficulties, and he referred to the difficulties of the inspiration of Franco Basaglia when he went into the United States and the series of difficulties he had. But here in Brazil, Franco Basalian's experience was essential and very relevant so that we could move forward with the Brazilian psychiatric reform. And as we have the psychiatric hospitals in Italy that were converted into open institutions, open to the society with multiple activities for the community and artistic ones. And here also in the Institute Nice da Silveira, we had a transformation of the old psychiatric hospital into a multiple institution with many activity centers like the Carnival Block and the Images Museum of the Unconscious and the Trilhos de Engenhos, the Center of Psychosocial Activities, Space and Time, the Culture and Path Centers, and other places of the institution that are now spaces of community interaction that are important for society, like the Carnival Block that goes out every year congregating hundreds of people participating in this activity, which is so important for Rio de Janeiro, which is the carnival. Now I'm going to pass the floor for us to have our final remarks and the answer to this last question of how you should refer to the people that are in these spaces. Do we use the patient term? We also use the customer terminology. And this term, how is this terminology that we refer to these people in these institutions? Now, I'll pass the floor to Janusz for his final remarks and answer to this question.
E o Paul também.
And to Paul, too.
To put out a big warning. Basalia was, look, I was a student at the time and I admired Basalia, but it turned out to be really bad, especially in New York. I think even in Italy, but in New York was a disaster. Mostly people ended up in the streets. And then on the long run, 20 years later, actually 50 years later, as of today, most of our patients ended up in jails. You know, so in the fervor of liberalization and in the fervor of cutting loose the mentally ill, the situation in many ways for most people with mental illness ended up to be worse. Next door to us at Creedmoor Psychiatric Center, there's a big jail, Rikers Island. 40% of the inmates there are people with mental illness. The reason being that to keep somebody at Creedmoor, it costs about between $100 and $150,000 a year. To keep somebody in jail costs $23,000 a year. So that's why you have to think about unintended consequences. Similarly, the demedicalization of psychiatry is also a certain danger I see in that progressive people should be thinking about more collaborative and cooperative relationship to psychiatry, because ultimately medication is the solution for most of the people with mental illness. Again, not a popular position within the progressive tradition. So this is just a big warning. In addition, another big warning is the Bob Dylan song, you know, they will try to stone you if you try to be so good, you know. So you have to be careful about that also. It's you're dealing with discrimination, and you're dealing with issues that are very sensitive to most people, and so you will have an uphill battle. My suggestion for progressive people who are trying to do good for the mentally ill is to be realistic, to be frugal, and to rely on the patients, and to be less theoretical, more practical, you know. That's it.
Eu não sei se o Paul gostaria de falar.
Would Paul like to
by
say
the way,
something?
they are zooming at the
Paul?
same time with our people here, so they are listening in on to you also.
We have the artists on from the New York Living
Yeah.
Museum.
Oh. Paul, would you like to say something? That was the question.
One more last thing to provoke you guys a little bit. You know, Ronald Lang, also a hero of the progressive movement from the 60s and the 70s. You should try to see the videotape of his commune in London. And because, you know, he resented psychiatry and medication, and most people are unmedicated in his commune there. And it's a disaster. It's no good. I wouldn't want to live there for 1 second. You know, again, a progressive person, very positive, but unintended consequences are to be considered.
Schaffe ich es 7 zu Hause?
Paul gostaria de complementar alguma coisa?
Paul, would you like to say something?
There was a question about the artist or the artwork. And I wanted to say, and my impression is it's one and the same, that the artwork is just one facet of the artist's personality. And I don't see them as being separate.
Yeah, may I say something warning again? You know, to be famous is a big pain in the ass. I mean, I don't recommend anybody to become famous, whether mentally ill or not. I think one has to get away from the individual psychology to more of a social psychology, and from individual artists more to the communities. That's where I like the idea of the living museums, you know, and to create art, not what's in the frame, which again Boyce talks about, but the social sculpture that emanates from the art, that creates warmth and solidarity and healing ultimately.
Obrigado, Janos. Obrigado, Paul.
Thank you, Janos. Thank you, Paul. What you said was super important. Also very important to think about what is the country's health system, and each country has its own way of social inclusion and social support. What Janos said is very important. The difficulties that the psychiatric reform went through in New York, and these are important points to bring into the discussion. Real situations that happen, concrete experiences. Now, here in Brazil, because we have a universal health system, an investment with all its difficulties, but within the policy of this universal health system, we had the possibility of psychiatric reform, which was very inclusive and had a very good outcome in many of its experiences, as we had abroad. Not only Trieste's experiences and other places in Italy, but like Soteria in the United States, with an open dialogue in Finland and other places around the world, which were projects that had success within the field of mental health, both with the use of medication and with the issue of the welcoming, social welcoming, and the institutions that welcome them. It's very important what Janos brought to us and Paul's contribution as well, so that we think about these issues in each of its specific realities and countries. I'm now going to pass the floor to Rose so that she can make her final remarks and anything else she would like to say about the question that was put.
I think, unfortunately, I couldn't hear what Janos just said, so I hope that I don't repeat my thoughts. I think here the Living Museum is like an art project on a metasphere or level. It's not just that there's artists that are exhibiting. It's an ever ongoing process of change and growth, and it is developing, and also if you think about that society should integrate into the Living Museum and heal from inside, then we have the hope that more of these places are built. So if the more living museums are built, the more society can become healed. And so I think this process already started, and Janusz's vision of mushrooming of living museums all over the world already happened. I also forget to mention Nadia in Georgia, who also opened up a wonderful living museum, and many more. And so I think if we want to have an influence on a large scale, then we have to build up a network of living museums all over the world to help each other and to share experiences and share everything that we know. And so I think that's the most important thing, because I can see here, I mean, I don't consider the people who come here as mental patients, because they come here and they are wonderful, fantastic personalities. They are so inspiring. They have so much wisdom. They are so funny, authentic, honest, and I can learn so much for myself from them. And I think society misses a lot of this incredible beauty that lies in their artworks, but also in their kindness. And I'm very spoiled here, because I'm here on a daily basis. I'm surrounded by all these wonderful artists and people here. And so I think society should experience more of it. So I wish you in Brazil that you also can open a living museum, and more in every bigger city.
Certamente desejamos muito isso, né?
For sure, that is all of our wishes. All of us wish that living museum comes to Brazil as well. That is why we are so thankful for your beautiful participation of our guests from the Living Museum directly from New York and Switzerland.
Obrigado, Rose. Obrigado, Janusz. Obrigado,
thank you,
Paul,
Rose. Thank you, Janusz. Thank you, Paul, for this beautiful dialogue between Living Museum and our Brazilian experiences. We are still not finished. I'm going to pass the floor to Gloria for her final remarks to answer the questions. Gloria, the floor is yours. We don't work with this term cure, but we expect the patient to bring this term here. What we have is the customer to have their desire for transformation, of reinsertion in the world, to acquire autonomy, to be able to be the owner of their own lives, and to be in the society as any other person. That is why we use the term customer and not patient. It was an enormous pleasure to be here, being part of this conversation. And art is at service of the reorganization of the institution, even if the living museum doesn't see them as patients and sees them as artists. And us here at the Unconscious Museum, we are a service within the public department of health here of the city of Rio de Janeiro. We are a public service. We have this aspect of treatment, of therapy, so that this person, through the artistic expression, can find their means and their way of expressing themselves personally as an individual. So it is a mental support service different from the Living Museum that works already directly with art, through art. I don't know if I was clear enough, but I thank you for being able to participate and talk a little bit about our experience here at our Museum of Imagery and Consciousness here at the Nisi da Silveira Institute. And we also have an archive of 400,000 pieces. The pieces produced by our customers are not commercialized because the museum is also a center of studies and research. We guarantee that the piece, this continuous process of organization and reorganization of each individual, stays here so that the process can be studied at its whole. So nothing is sold of what is produced in the ateliers of the museum. But now, if this person, this customer, this artist produces something, a piece at home, well, that belongs to them and they can do whatever they want with that art piece. But everything that is produced within the expressive atelier and therapeutic atelier is part of the treatment and so stays and belongs to the museum. That's it. Thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you so much for presenting these beautiful people and glorious institutions. Thank you so much. Thank you, Gloria. Now I'm going to pass the floor to Paula. Here, we don't use the term patient. We're not used to it. We prefer the term person who's living here because they live here waiting for the possibility of a new home or a home. So we use the term person who is living here for these people that are here with us. And I think that there is a quote that I like, a psychologist that works here with us, Marcia, and once she said it to me, it makes a lot of sense. It says that the possibility that we provide to those living here currently to go through these many artistic interventions and creativity processes and expression processes is the possibility of them making a mark. The institution made a mark on them, and now they can leave their mark here as well. I think that is what we are going for. That is the process in which I feel myself just honored to be part of. And I would like to thank the opportunity that you gave me today to participate here. It was very nice, very good to be with everyone and being able to share all the experiences that are always in pro of a greater objective, which is mental health. I think that is what unites us to art and this path of integration and to provide a new meaning to all of this process in mental health. Thank you so much.
Então, estamos finalizando a nossa mesa da manhã.
We are coming to the end of our conversation here. I'd like to thank from the bottom of my heart Rose, Janos, Paul, Gloria, and Paula for all of these insights that they brought in a beautiful way with such rich experiences that they present. Thank the festival's organization, to thank the participation of the audience. And now I'm going to thank so much also for having
e
this
vou passar a
opportunity
palavra
to
para o
participate
nosso
here. And now I
MC,
pass the floor
Elielton.
to our
Elton, você está
MC,
por aí?
Elielton. Elielton, are you there? Yes, I am here. I'm enjoying the entire debate a lot, and I'd like to thank for the mediation that you just ran. It also contributed with the understanding of this language and this intersection between art, health, mental health, and museology. All these 4 presentations were very good. It's actually 5 with yours. I thank you so much for your participation. And now we have a video of an artist called Nailton, who is here from Franco da Rocha, and he goes beyond institutions. Before passing the floor to him, I'd like to know if you'd like to say anything else to our audience. No? No, I'd just really like to thank deeply and to congratulate the festival. Thank you so much, Eduardo. Now, Nailton, I started speaking to you now about him. He is an artist that produces a lot in Franco da Rocha in the city and uses the cultural spaces, the cultural house and cultural space. He uses these spaces as his own atelier and he produces. Now we're going to show a video that has about 4 minutes in length and you're going to know more about him and I hope you like it very much. Then we'll come back to Rose with the Living Museum in Switzerland to show how the pieces are looking and a little bit more of the band that presented itself a little bit earlier. And Nailton also connected with the Living Museum last year, and some of his pieces went to them. He participated at the context of the seminar that we had last year, the second Soy Loco Juquery, and now you're going to meet him. He's unbelievable. He even dances. It's going to be a great connection with him for you to connect with the band later. Here's the video.
E com outros professores lá, nunca mais nenhuma colocava eu para fazer desenho. Aí eu, aí botava no B e ficava sem saber a letra. Aí, na hora que botava no aí ficava. Na hora que botava de novo no na hora que botava de novo, na hora que botava de novo, Aí a professora, só fala A, meu irmão, só fala A. Fala B, fala C, fala I, fala E, fala... São letras. E quem disse que eu sabia? Mudando do papo cavaco, o professor viu as minhas fotografias, viu meus desenhos, gostou, aí chegou para mim e falou assim, que tal nós fazer uma posição? Você autoriza? Aí eu falei assim, a hora que quiser fazer, tá por conta de você. Sabe por que eu gosto de desenhar? Porque o que eu sinto? O que eu sinto é alegria, Deus tá ali. Muita gente que foi pra ver lá, tirou foto comigo. Muita gente. E você autoriza para fazer mais uma? Aí, quando eu já autorizei uma, já pode fazer as 2 ou 3 ou 4. Lembrei agora. O que veio lá no Juquery. Levou 2 meses para a Suíça. 3, levou 3. A mulher lá do Rio de Janeiro. levou também. E ele falou que para mim que não vai ficar só na exposição, vai fazer outras coisas diferentes, mas falou para mim que é segredo, não pode falar. Se é segredo, é segredo. Zé Fini. Aí uma docinha.
Hi, Nathan. If you listen to us now, you're such a great artist. We are so proud that we have some of your drawings here at the Living Museum and they're hanging on the walls and impressing everybody who passes by them. Amazing. And it was such a nice insight now to see more of your work and of your dance. I loved it. So I hope to see you soon in Brazil if we have the chance to visit one day. But now you must be very excited to see what our live paintings, how they developed. And first, I begin to show the work of Joseph Gomez. Mr. Gomez, what is this? How did it develop in the process?
Well, I had always wanted to do a type of an Aborigine style of painting. And so after doing this painting here, then I did this one. And because I wanted to do something very different. And I've always liked this kind of a style. And actually I've pleased, but yeah, it developed kind of on its own. You know, there was a little bit of an evolution on it, but at one point it took the shape that I wanted, and then I just went with it from there. But I'm very, very happy with it, so thanks, Janusz.
Thank you so much that you did this live painting for us, and for me it's exciting to see that it's a totally unique style again, and all your paintings are so different. It's amazing to see how many different styles that you can do. Yeah, Thank you.
I think it's interesting too. Don't know what to think sometimes. Thank you.
So now we go to Corinne Schleuniger. Wow, look at this nun. Amazing. Wie ging's beim Bemalen? Das erste Mal.
Sehr gut. Also ein bisschen das Problem hatte ich, weil sich die Farbe sicher noch verändern wird mit dem Trocknen. Vielleicht muss ich am Montag nochmals malen, vielleicht ist es genug. Aber es ging ja gut, erstaunlich gut. Ja.
It went well, she just said, and she has to wait until the color dries totally to see if she wants to go on working on this next Monday, maybe. And yeah, I think it's a very impressive, beautiful piece of art. And thank you so much, Corinne Schleuniger, for showing so much of you and your artwork. Yeah. So now we are proud that our Living Session Band will play more songs for us until we come to the end of this festival day. Thank you so much.
Wow.
Que incrível, Rose! Maravilhoso! Gostei
So
muito de conhecer
incredible,
as
Rose.
instalações do Living Museum da
Marvelous,
Suíça.
fabulous. I
Gostaria
really
de
like to
passar
know
a fazer uma
the
palavra de
premises of the Living
encerramento,
Museum in
né, e
Switzerland.
dizer que
I'd
estou
like
muito
now to
feliz
pass
em
the
te
floor
ouvir falar sobre a artista
and
Nailton,
give a
tão
closing
querida para nós
remark
aqui
that
no
I'm
Museu da
so
Rocha,
happy,
e
and it
sabendo
was
que
so
as
good
obras
to hear
estão
you
aí
talk
com
about
vocês.
Nanailton
E
because
espero muito que você consiga
he
vir
is
aqui nos visitar,
so
conhecer o Museu de Arte do
lovable, and we
Cesar,
love him
ao qual
so
tem
much
muitos
here in Rio de
artistas
Janeiro.
daquele
We'd
como
really like
artistas,
to know
além de ter,
that he is
além de ter
there,
gente
and
brilhante do
also
Juquery, né?
would like
São
to have you
artistas também
here
da
as well.
cidade. Então,
And there are
eu
many
costumo dizer que
artists
eu
here in
vim
the
aqui visitar
city
o
and
Rio para
others
visitar o
that
museu.
were
Te passo a palavra agora.
inpatients at the psychiatric hospital in Juquery. Now the floor is yours, Rose.
So I want to thank so much that you gave us this incredible floor and platform to spread out the Living Museum idea globally. And I want to thank all involved institutions that made it possible. I want to thank Victor Fish and the whole team, Eduardo, Gloria, Paula, Janusz, Paul. And it's wonderful what you created there with this Festival de Artes. And I hope that we can keep connected and can participate maybe also the next years. And now a special thanks goes to Alex Bruckmann from Bridge Media in Switzerland. He helped and supported me so much with all the technical equipment. Alex and everybody of us want to thank goodbye. And here's the Living Session Band and our artists and our staff team. And Alex with the cameraman. Thank you so much. Thank you. So we want to say goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, Brazil, and hope to see you soon.
Ai, que lindo, que encerramento lindo.
Beautiful.
É muito bom ver todo mundo
That is
reunido.
the most beautiful closing ever.
Muito lindo
It's
mesmo.
beautiful to see
Muito
everyone
obrigado,
together.
gente. Muito obrigado pelo
Very
trabalho que
beautiful,
vocês
all of you
desenvolvem
together. Thank
no
you
Living
so
Museum da
much. Thank you
Suíça,
for the
que
work
possa servir
that
de
you develop
inspiração
at the Living
para nós aqui
Museum of
também.
Switzerland, and I hope it's an inspiration to all of us.
Agora, eu quero dizer que esse é o
Now,
segundo
I would
dia
like to
do nosso
say
seminário
that this is the
e que
second
teremos
day of our
programação
seminar,
até o
and
sábado, dia
that we will
26.
have a
Então,
schedule until
acompanhe, fiquem
Saturday, the
conosco.
26th.
Amanhã vamos
Please
trazer
continue
uma
with us.
apresentação de outra
Tomorrow, we
instituição
will have a
parceira e muito
presentation from
próxima do Museu de
another
Arte Osório
institution
Cesar,
that is a
que é o
partner of
Museu
us
Bispo do
here and
Rosário
very
Arte
close to
Contemporânea. Será uma apresentação
the
feita pela
museum, which is the
diretora-geral
Bispo
Raquel
do Rosário
Fernandes.
Museum.
Vai
The
começar às
general
3h30 da
director,
tarde,
Raquel
horário de
Fernandes, will
Brasília.
start. It will
E
start
depois
at
teremos duas
3:30
rodas de
p.m.
conversa com
Brazil time, and
artistas.
then we're going to
Teremos
have
a
two
roda de conversa com
conversation
a artista Pedro
circles with
Quintanilha,
artists. We have one with
Antônio
Pedro Quintanilha.
Satilho,
We will have
Jéssica,
Antônio
se não
Satilio.
posso errar o sobrenome dela, Jéssica
We'll
Barbosa,
also have Jessica
Flávia
Barbosa,
Mielnik e com mediação do
Flavia
Arturo
Mielnik, with the
Gameiro.
mediation
E
of
aí, às
Arturo
5h30,
Gamero.
teremos uma
And then
outra
at
roda de
5:30
conversas com
Brazilian time,
artistas,
we're going to have
com
another
Edmar
conversation
Almeida,
circle
Vitor Por
with
Deus,
Edmar
Teresley de
Almeida,
Bonfim,
Victor Bordeaux,
e
and
mediação
Risileu
da
de
Isabela
Bonfim, with the
Valente,
mediation of
que vai
Isabella
também exibir
Valente,
vídeo,
who is
um
also going
documentário
to
dirigido por
show a
ela,
video,
Raquel
a
Incomuns.
documentary that she
Então fiquem
directed
conosco,
called
temos mais programação para
Uncommons.
amanhã e para o
Be with
sábado.
us, stay with us, stick
Quero
with
dizer
us,
também
and we
que
have
esses são outros
more
tantos frutos que
more
são
agendas for
resultados
tomorrow and
deste
Saturday. I'd
seminário
also
e
like to say that
deste
so many
festival.
fruits
Então,
and things that
do
fruitify
trabalho, da
from this seminar
parceria,
and this
né, do
festival,
Sou Louco de
from
Juquery
the
e do
work
Museu
and the
de Arte Osório
partnership of
César,
Soy Louco por
temos
Ti
o Jogo
Juquery
das
and
Memórias de
from the
Juquery.
Zé do
Então,
César
vejam a
Museum, we
publicação que foi
have the
feita lá
Juquery
no perfil do
Memory
Instagram do
Game.
Sou Louco.
So look at the
Concorram
publication at the
a alguns
Instagram
exemplares que
profile
já chegaram,
of
né?
Soy
Então,
Loco.
quem for sorteado, ele vai
Look at,
receber na sua
go
casa.
for the
Como
pool of
fruto do
to
Soy
get
Louco, temos essa semana também
a sample of
exibições
the
no
game
Tarô dos
to get a
Loucos.
free one.
É projeto
We are
que fez
also
o
going
mundo
to
do
have
Soy Louco
the
do ano passado e que
project
esse
that's going to
ano
be that was exhibited the
conseguiu, por
last
meio de
year,
um
the
edital do Fundo
Locos
Municipal de Cultura
Tarot,
de Franco da Rocha,
and they got
financiamento para
through the
que o projeto
municipal
pudesse crescer
financing
ainda mais.
from
Então,
the
eles estão
city of Franco
exibindo
da
uma
Rocha. They
peça de
got a
teatro pelo
financing and
YouTube,
they're
o Tarô
growing.
dos
They're going to
Loucos,
be
por meio
showing
a
a
da Casa
theater
Realeza de
play
Teatro, é o contrário, a Casa Realeza de Teatro.
virtually It's called the
Foi
Casa
um trabalho
Realize
maravilhoso ali
Teatro. I'm
feito pelo
sorry, I
Eduardo
said it wrong.
Bartolomeu, uma equipe
The
junto com
work is
ele.
wonderful, it's done by
Então
Eduardo
acompanhem,
Bartolomeu and all
fiquem
of his
conosco,
team.
fiquem com essas outras
Please stick
programações.
with us
Temos muitas
and
atividades
stick to the
culturais
rest of the
para
schedule. We have
fornecer neste período
many
de pandemia.
cultural
A gente espera que possam ser
programs to
redutoras
offer
de
during this
danos também
pandemic,
pelos quais estamos
and I
passando
hope
neste
that
ano.
they can
Quero
all
agradecer
be a
muito
support to this
quem
time
esteve
that
até
we're all
aqui,
going
nos
through. I'd
ouvindo, nos
also like to
assistindo,
thank deeply
participando,
everyone that was here
comentando.
until now,
Continuem conosco, voltem
participating,
amanhã e voltem no
making
sábado.
comments.
Estamos aqui com
Stick
todo
with
trabalho
us.
de
Come back
produção
tomorrow
esperando
and
vocês.
Saturday.
Então,
We
continuem
have an
conosco.
entire
A
production waiting
programação
for
está
you.
completa no
Stick with
Sou Louco
us.
por Ti,
The program is full
Juquery.com,
at
é o site do
solocoporti,
festival. E acompanhe nas redes sociais
juquery.com,
também,
which is
Instagram
our
e
website,
Facebook.
and follow us on
Então,
the
fiquem
website, on
conosco
the social
e
media,
forte
Instagram
abraço.
and Facebook.
Até mais.
Stick with us, and a warm hug to all of you.
Soy loco por ti, Juquery. Soy loco em casa. Este ano, o festival Soy Loco por Ti, Juquery
This
é em
year, the
casa,
festival
em
Soy
sua
Louco
casa.
por Ti, Juquery
Soy
happens at
loco
home,
por
at your
ti,
home.
Juquery.